So once more into the breach, dear friends, in an attempt to finally end this once and for all. We are at the final chapter of this book, and we'll get to why there are pages at the end. But trust me, we're about to finally bury and put an end to this book once and for all. So let's begin. Chapter 19, King of the World. One of the problems with our culture that we have somehow taken up to the belief that the allopathic medicine is king. It's not a belief, it's an actual fact. This allopathic medicine, or shall we say modern medicine, as you've been labelling it throughout this, and should have been labelling it throughout this entire book, is based on evidence. Mountains and mountains of evidence. Something which you have been unable to produce throughout this entire book. I mean, if a treatment isn't adopted by an MD, well then it just isn't valid. Harumph. But MDs are not but MDs are not the kings of medicine. The profession doesn't come close to being able to help us with the most basic health problems, yet we worship at its altar nevertheless. It is not worship, it is not a religion, and they can help you with these basic health problems that you say they can't, but you haven't provided any evidence. When you've said things like that, you haven't provided any evidence as to what they can and can't help with. You've been very, very vague in that answer. Instead of recognising their limitations and moving on, allopaths just dismiss everything that they have had no training in as irrelevant, foolish, or imaginary. How very scientific. They don't dismiss it, and the reason why they do dismiss it, shall we say, and the reason why they dismiss it is because you don't have any scientific evidence yourself that your treatments work. In fact, a lot of your treatments, as you say this, like cures like, doesn't have any basis in scientific evidence. In fact, you've admitted you don't know how it works in this very book. The fundamental problem here is that most MDs are arrogant and pompous. That's your opinion, that they're arrogant and pompous. They are the Duke and they think they are the King. To all allopaths, God, clinical nutrition, homeopathy, acupuncture, energy medicine, poetry, religion, spirituality, human relationships, emotion, philosophy, art, music, psychic phenomena, hundreds of other subjects are all nonsense and irrelevant because they do not fit comfortably into their cyclopean left-brained reductionist worldview of life as a measurable machine. I also think that's ridiculous as well and doesn't have any place in modern medicine at all. So does that make me a left-brain reductionist worldview thinking whatever then, Pete? Because I tell you now, psychic phenomena doesn't have any relevance at all when it comes to modern medicine, or medicine at all. And people wonder why I call him a quack when he states that is somehow relevant to, medical practice. It isn't in the least. Where were we? Arguably, however, the metaphysical concepts such as spirituality, love, thought, and consciousness itself are pretty heavy ones. I have used them here only as examples to help you understand how allopaths and holistic doctors, something you've said that are the same, but you've now decided to call them two different things, which you've said and identified at the start of this book are apparently the same thing. which is weird. Think about the world that we live in, because somehow thinks that something informs how they will act on it. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I think that's a bit of a typo, Pete. On a more practical level, these differing worldviews are completely responsible for all the therapies prescribed by each and every doctor for each and every different medical discipline. Oh, so he's admitting different medical disciplines exist. How wonderful, considering for this entire book you haven't admitted that there are such things as different medical disciplines. Oh dear. I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. I've been left with this cough. Ugh. Allopaths do what they do because they are trained in reductionist medical model, not because they are malevolent. The trouble I have with most of them is that they think they are know-it-alls. No, that shouldn't be your problem. The problem is, Pete, they do know more than you, so they are know-it-alls to you. You have said before that doctors talk down to you. I am not surprised with the stuff you have brought up in this book, because I find myself talking down to you, Pete. I know probably more about medical matters than you, Pete, and I'm not a doctor. And they have absolutely no time to entertain any conversation about anything that is outside their keen... Yeah, that's weird. That looks like there's a page missing there. As far as allopaths are concerned, if they didn't learn it in medical school, it's simply not valid. That is true, because they are taught at medical school with science and evidence. Allopaths are not, well, sorry, naturopaths, like you, Pete, are not taught with science and evidence. In fact, if you go and read Marie Burritt-Holmes' blog, a former naturopath who people like Pete hate because they've come out and told everyone about what you get up to in your studies, I wouldn't go near you. And you shouldn't. So I encourage everyone, go and read her blog and read about her time at the top naturopathic school, which old Pete here went to. If they didn't learn it at medical school, it's simply not valid. Period. End of discussion. As it should be. Unless it is proven scientific, then they also have a responsibility to learn it. If they left it at that, it wouldn't be too bad. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? But they just had to take it a few steps further. They just had to try and monopolise the medical industry. No, doctors didn't monopolise the medical industry. They are not the... well, they are. Particularly when it comes to research. They are the kings. And so far, Pete, as I have continually said throughout every single chapter, all you have to do is produce your own medical research and show that it works. As you said, there are lots of naturopaths, so why don't you all club together and do this research? Because then you'd have a seat at this table which you so crave. They just had to go out of their way to make it difficult / impossible for any other doctor, you're not a doctor, to practice any other type of medicine. Yes, because we don't want frauds and charlatans saying that they can cure things when they can't, like you, Pete. Meanwhile, the poor patients suffer the brunt of their failed and dangerous treatment on a daily basis. In today's medical culture, the the majority of patients have no other medical option than to go to the allopath. This is a travesty. No, it's not a travesty, Pete. Most of the clinical work that I have done in the last 20 years have involved cleaning up the messes that allopaths have made with their patients' health. And where is this mountain of this medical patients and these medical records and this research, Pete, that you could present, you know, that you could send to a medical journal and get peer reviewed? Remember, knowledge is power and perspective is clarifying. Now, your perspective, Pete, is someone who wants to make the big money that you seem to be jealous about doctors making, and you want a seat at this table that you do not deserve. And you know how to get a seat at this table, Pete, but you don't want to do the legwork that's involved to get a seat at that table. So instead you cry and whine about it. And you have to produce ridiculous books calling, you know, what MDs do ridiculous. And instead of showing that and producing facts, you produce nothing. You've produced no facts in this book at all. So let me summarise the situation for you once and for all. Then we can move on to the second part of my diatribe, as something I call the acquisition of health. And we will not be going on to part 2, because that is Pete's sales pitch. And we will be visiting one part which I will do in a separate video of this series. But needless to say, once we've done this chapter, we are only going to read the last chapter of this book, and then we are done. Because I am not going to read to you a sales pitch, because that's what the rest of this book is a sales pitch. And I am not going to read that to you. And I'm not going to bother doing a video to it, because I am not going to promote Pete, because that's essentially what it is. It's a marketing tool. And I'm not going to bother reading it to you, because it's pointless reading it. So here we are, the final bit that Pete wants to do. So allopaths do not believe in anything that they cannot measure with machinery, and the more machinery, the better. That machinery has helped us advance medical and scientific knowledge, Pete. Are you so stupid as to just wave away this machinery? What research would Pete do? I really wonder how Pete would expect research to be carried out. And that is one question, if the debate between me and Pete ever happens, is one question I would ask him. If Pete was a researcher, how would he carry out research? I would love to know that. To them, the soul is a fragment of the imagination, which it is, and has absolutely no impact on the health of the human body, which it doesn't. Consciousness and emotions are merely the result of a biomechanical interactions. Life itself, like the spirit-like vital force that brings light into the eyes of the living, is the result of some uncategorized biomedical phenomenon. Here we are with the vital force nonsense again, which is for humans talk. There are no energy meridians, no vital force, and no such thing as the intuition or anything psychic, because it doesn't exist. All disease has its roots in the physical body entirely. So there's no such thing as viruses then, or bacteria. That's another question I'd like to ask him. And it's best studied by postmortems and examination of tissue in culture dishes under the microscope. We do more than that, Pete. There's more than that in medical testing, Pete. But, you know, Specific details of the subjective symptoms of a living person who are sick are more or less irrelevant. Because if a person's sick, they are sick of a particular type of thing. That is how we treat it. When it is most important to arrive at the correct diagnosis through objective discovery. So you're basically saying, Pete, that you should, to get a proper medical diagnosis, you shouldn't look at what's going on in the body and observe what is going on with them, and use the available information and medical knowledge to find out what is wrong with the person. Instead, you should probe them and discover what's wrong with them for yourself. That is absurd. The treatments enjoyed rely on a sympathetic, patented pharmaceutical drug exclusively. Synthetic drugs are used to thwart the symptoms of the disease as best as possible and subdue and overpower the natural expression of the disease process. So, to Pete, to you, if you get a disease, it is something that is emotionally wrong with you. That is absolutely wrong. 100%. The treatments are rarely curative because they do not attack the roots of the cause of the illness. There is no such thing as the wisdom of the body, which is something you've made up, Pete. Nutrition is an afterthought, and it is delivered, and it is and it is never delivered as a primary medical treatment, and is often dismissed as irrelevant, which it often is. Because there is no such thing as a under-nutritionalized body or a human being. There are certain conditions which cause the body not to produce the nutrients it needs, which then people need to take vitamins, but otherwise taking vitamins is a waste of time, and that's what Pete wants you to do. He wants to convince you that you need to take vitamins, because that's money in the bank to him. It is never delivered as a primary medical treatment and is often dismissed as irrelevant. Symptom suppression is encouraged. This thing about symptom suppression is ridiculous. Because what Pete is trying to convince you is, if you've gone to the doctor and you've received drugs that have made you feel better, then what Pete is essentially telling you is, oh, you're not better. You've merely just suppressed your symptoms. So you're still sick. You need to come to me. I'll cure you. Can you not see the quack treatment and the psychological marketing trickery he's trying to pull on you? Individual treatment is unnecessary. Doctors do treat patients on an individual basis. Unless the patient has an allergy to standardized medical use, symptom mitigation after symptom suppression is a fiction that does not happen. And the organ systems of the body should all be treated separately. Specialization is encouraged. That's a good thing, Pete. Specialization is a good thing. Surgery is encouraged. Surgery is good. Patients should not complain about their treatment nor ask too many questions about it because, well, what other opinion do they have? They have an entire medical background of scientific information that their doctors are working from and should trust. You are trying to undermine that trust so that they come to you and then they spend money on your quack treatments, which you claim are not expensive, but when you pile on the prices like you do, because there's initial treatment, the actual treatment itself, the drugs, the vitamins you prescribe, the continuous vitamin treatments you tell them they have to take, and other things. All that stuff soon adds up. Pete tells you that he's the cheaper option, but he's not. Where are we? Well, all the other medical disciplines are little more than quackery and should be outlawed. No, quacks like you should be outlawed, Pete. There are lots of other valid medical disciplines, but yours isn't one of them. The doctor should not be questioned, and the less the patient communicates, the better. If the treatment endangers troublesome side effects, the patient will be just given another prescription drug to manage them. If the treatment kills the patient, that's okay. It was done in the name of science. No, it's not okay if a treatment kills a patient. There are practices and there are things that look into. There are such things as malpractice suits. You know, if a patient dies under the watch of a doctor, then it's investigated. It is not just swept under the rug, as Pete would have you think. Are we clear now? Makes you want to run out and visit your MD, doesn't it? All of this clarity and perspective make one thing certain. That you're a quack, Pete. And the whole reason you wrote this book was to convince people that doctors are evil and that they need to be coming see you instead. And that, you know, they should go to your naturopath and start seeking advice from you instead of doctors when they get ill. For all chronic disease states, allopathic medicine is a bad choice. Is only good for dental care, surgery when it is absolutely necessary, emergency care, military field medicine, and for some nasty infectious diseases. In these areas it excels fittingly. And yet you bash all this evidence that is built on. And yet you have the nerve to say, oh, that's fine. But an MD isn't fine. Instead, they need to come and see me. Can you not see what I've been telling you from the very beginning? He wants a seat at the table. He wants to be in the MD position. When he has no right to. He has produced in this entire book no evidence that he deserves that seat at the table. And I've done many videos telling you why people like him don't. For everything else, this is dangerous, destructive, harmful, suppressive, stupid, and just plain wrong. The king is dead, I wish. Regretfully, the king is very much alive and well and living off drug company stock dividends. Woe is me. And you and everyone who is sick has no idea what the holistic medicine is or any idea of what it can do, really. Well, it does nothing, Pete. And so that is the second to last chapter, because we will be reading the last chapter, chapter 26, Everybody's Sick. I've already gone over why we won't be reading the rest, because it is a sales pitch, and it just proves it in the last chapter and what Pete wants you to do for it. So look forward to chapter 26. Until then, we're nearly done. Thank God.